Hey, Dan.
Hello.
What is this? What is this? You know what I mean? What is this between
No,
us?
I don't.
What's going on here? What's this? There's a chemistry. You know what I mean? There's a spark.
Are you saying you're in love with me?
Well, I don't know.
It feels like that's what you're saying.
I just feel like maybe together we can make something special.
Oh,
And you know what that special
see.
thing is? An Uncle Doug.
Well, hello.
When an uncle and an uncle love each other very much, there's a special hug.
I'm going to find out that my older brother and my podcast partner, who's younger than me, are my parents.
Yeah.
We are.
All right.
And
fair
you're
enough.
your own grandpa, so that's
There's
fine.
love in the world of illusion.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
speaking of transitions, segue.
We weren't, but go on.
Well, your uncles, if
Speaking
nothing
of
else,
awkward transitions, I think is what you mean.
we three are but chroniclers of the myriad bad ideas and embarrassing practices of our young species. Many of these ideas and practices, while ancient in origin, are alive and well and actively making the world a worse place. I'm looking at you, Bikram Yoga.
Yeah.
But some of these ideas and practices have gone the way of the dodo. Today I'd like to talk about one of those ideas, which is not only functionally extinct, but gave birth to and then gave way to something positive. And not only that, but its very name is a metaphor for backward and useless belief systems. Today let's talk about alchemy.
Woohoo!
Yay. The earliest evidence we have of alchemy as an independent discipline are some Chinese texts dating back to the 1st century BCE. However, before long, it was being practiced all over Asia, Africa, and Europe. Some of the practices of alchemy date back many centuries before that, but it wasn't until the 1st century BCE that they were gathered together in kind of a common discipline or with a common goal. It appears that alchemy was born in 3 different regions of the world and maybe independently of each other. Those 3 regions were China, the Indian subcontinent, and the Mediterranean region. The latter gave way to the Greco-Roman, Islamic, and eventually medieval alchemy, and is what we are most familiar with. Like its eventual descendant, chemistry, alchemy had many applications. The most famous was chrysopoeia, or the transmutation of base metals like lead or mercury into noble metals like gold. That's kind of what most people think of when they think of alchemy, and they are not wrong.
That's kind of the plot of Pretty Women, too.
Mark, you say that about all of my segments.
It's true. I don't know. One of us is obsessed with Pretty Woman, and I don't think it's me.
Alchemy, however, also attempted to produce an elixir of immortality, often referred to as the Philosopher's Stone. Alchemy was also an attempt to create panaceas capable of curing various or all diseases. So it might be time to dust off them alchemy books after all.
Yeah.
Yeah, if bleach doesn't work, up your butt, some mercury or some lead will.
Well, why not?
Why not? What do you have to lose?
What do you have to lose? Alchemy was preoccupied with discovering alkahest, or a universal solvent, as well as the perfection of the body with alchemical magnum opus. So the term magnum opus actually comes from alchemy.
Does it?
Yeah.
Really?
It's the great work of perfecting the human body.
Huh.
I am the only person that I know of to have achieved. So
It's true. You are at last you are perfect, and you can go to Kolob.
Well, since I haven't seen you, Uncle Dan, in like 4 months corporally, I'll have to take your word for it. You may very well be like a golden god.
see
I'm-
everybody.
I'm becoming what Patton Oswalt calls B-word fat. You can tell how fat I am from when I use words with B in it. Okay. Alchemy was like I said a minute ago, alchemy sprung up in 3 different regions at pretty much the same time. As time went by,
Coincidence? Can't be.
well, that's what's really fascinating. The 3 branches of alchemy eventually became acquainted with each other and largely merged. But there is little to no evidence that they had a common origin. So it seems that alchemy, like its sister proto-science astrology, is a necessary step in conscious intelligence. So, they both sought to explain the natural world, and both led to actual sciences that actually do help explain the natural world.
Well,
so,
and also, like, if those were all cultures in the world that valued precious metals, and gold was an important commodity, right?
right.
So it does make sense. If do you have to go dig it out of the ground with a pickaxe, or can we just make it?
Right.
Like,
And
that totally makes sense.
yeah, and also, it's easy to see Mercury plays a big role, and it's easy to see why it does, because Mercury is fascinating, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
And delicious.
And delicious.
It goes down smooth.
Yeah, that was one of the bad sides of alchemy. But
Yeah.
Gold and lead share a lot of characteristics. They're both very heavy and very soft.
Yeah.
Right.
They're close together on the periodic
Doug,
table.
you and I share those characteristics as well.
But they, they're close together on the periodic table, which of course none of these people knew about. But you can kind of see that, like, okay, I've got this heavy soft metal here, and I've got this very precious metal here. They seem similar. Maybe I can figure something out, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, before we dig into the alchemy we all love and know, let's just take a second and talk about the three independent strains. Chinese alchemy was strongly tied to Taoism, unsurprisingly, and was most interested in medicine. Some traditional forms of Chinese medicine, such as acupuncture and moxibustion, found their way into Chinese
Don't make up
alchemy.
words.
All right.
No, so
What is moxibustion, Doug?
we should actually dig into this a little bit, because it's the burning of mugwort on various parts of the body.
Yeah.
Is that like cupping? Is it like a cupping thing?
It's not. It's equally effective. How about that?
Does it leave the hideous fucking scars that look like you've been attacked by a Lovecraftian old god octopus?
No. No, it's got that. You put like a little bit of mugwort on a leaf and light it on fire, like on certain points of the body. It's supposed to pull energy or something.
It's called moxibustion?
Moxibustion.
Moxibustion. Copy that.
Yeah.
No safe word.
So those traditions like acupuncture and moxibustion.
I can't remember it. Fuck. What's the
Mugwort.
Yeah. You know the leaf. What? God.
So things like that and acupuncture found their way into Chinese alchemy. But perhaps the most lasting contribution of Chinese alchemy is gunpowder.
Right.
Yeah, in the 9th century, Chinese alchemy.
Thanks, Chinese alchemy.
Thank you, China.
It's
really great.
worked out great.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
In the 9th century, Chinese alchemists were trying to create an elixir of life, and what must be one of history's biggest misses came up with black powder. They quickly figured out how to use black powder in fireworks and nothing else, and everything's been fine since.
Yep.
Chinese alchemy also held the belief that small doses of mercuric sulfide was the way to go. This led to widespread suicide by those who ingested it. And then rather than change their practices, the alchemists simply explained that such a death was actually desirable and granted access to Taoist heavens. So,
Oh, nice.
Wow. Yeah. So that's where the American pharmaceutical industry was born.
Exactly.
Oh, no, actually, the side effect is good. That's a good thing. You're welcome.
That extra arm is going to help.
Yeah.
Indian alchemy traces its knowledge of metallurgy and botany back as far as the 2nd millennium BCE, but began as a distinct discipline in the 2nd to 5th centuries CE. This strain of alchemy was very focused on the creation of the divine body and reaching immortality in this life with this body. So Indian alchemy is mostly in Sanskrit and is not surprisingly heavily linked to Buddhism, Hinduism, and certain yoga practices. Mercury was also very popular in Indian alchemy, as was sulfur. There are recipes for a mercury mix that consists of semen from the god Siva and menstrual blood from the goddess Devi. So enjoy.
Where do you get those?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is that just at the local market, or?
I think you kind of need to use a stand-in. So, like Mark said, it's one weird night.
Yeah.
So Hellenistic or Mediterranean alchemy, which I'm just going to call alchemy from now on, probably got its start with Egyptian jewelers who were making gold trinkets and statues for ceremonial purposes and became fascinated by the properties of gold and other metals. The most important figure in alchemical mythology, is Hermes Trismegistus, or the thrice great Hermes. But he carries the caduceus, or serpent staff, that Uncle Dan talked about in episode 122.
Sure.
The caduceus became the principal symbol for alchemy. Hermes is important because he laid out basically all the principal tenets and practices of Hellenistic alchemy, many that survive to this day. A bit differently from Chinese and Indian alchemy, which were born and nurtured in more isolated environments, Hellenistic alchemy came about at the height of Alexandria and was influenced by Pythagoreanism, Platonism, Stoicism, and Gnosticism. So it's a bit more heady. A foundation was that all things in the universe were formed from only 4 elements: earth, air, water, and fire. It's the manipulation of these 4 elements that forms the backbone of alchemy. Believing their practices to be mystical, alchemists sought to obscure their work through codes and ciphers so that other alchemists wouldn't steal their recipes and secrets. That didn't do a lot for the advancement of the science.
Yeah. It's one of the first principles of science. Don't share your
Hide
work.
everything. Alchemy was not quite a religion, although it had mystical and mythological beliefs, and it was not quite a science, mostly because it had mystical and mythological beliefs. As such, there are examples of pagan, Jewish, and Christian alchemists. So you can kind of be that and those other things. There are, of course, examples of alchemists suffering condemnation and persecution by those same religions, because everything in history was terrible.
Yeah.
After the fall of Rome, alchemy became almost exclusively mystical and stagnated for a couple hundred years. Then in the 7th century, the Islamic world adopted alchemy and ran with it. They probably have the greatest claim on the name of the game, with the Arabic word alchemia. In the late 8th century, Jabir ibn Hayyan
Nailed it.
introduced a new approach using scientific methodology and experimentation in a controlled environment called a laboratory. As I mentioned, many alchemists believe their practices to be mystical and so endeavored to keep them secret. Hayyan realized that in order to progress, alchemists needed to share their understanding with each other, so he encouraged alchemists to keep detailed records of their work and not encrypt them. Hayyan is thusly known as the father of chemistry, although it would take a long time for that science to really develop.
Yeah, well, the Arabs were far ahead of the Europeans with science generally, weren't they?
Especially in this era. Yeah. This is algebra came out of this.
They had developed really advanced optics.
Yep.
Yeah.
So things took off after that. Islamic alchemists soon discovered hydrochloric, sulfuric, and nitric acids. They also discovered a chemical mixture called aqua regia, which was a combination of nitric and hydrochloric acid, which could dissolve gold, which was crazy. That was obviously a big deal in alchemy. They actually did something.
So, they did the opposite, which is destroy gold.
Right, exactly.
Yes. We want to make gold, but we ended up making it go away. You're welcome.
But that's so funny you say that, because that's exactly the thinking. They figured out how to destroy gold, so their thinking was, well, we just have to figure out how to reverse that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense.
How do you put this acid in reverse?
Yeah.
And one Islamic alchemist, Jabir, began adding elements to the accepted list of 4. He was the first one to add actual elements to the list of elements, such as sulfur, mercury, and salt.
When was this? What?
This is like the 8th century.
Wow, crazy.
And before anybody asks me, I know that salt is 2 elements, but progress is progress.
Yeah.
Jabir, by the way, also postulated a theory called corpuscularianism, which held that all physical bodies are made up of minute particles.
Wow.
Yeah. It didn't go anywhere. I mean, that science didn't actually kind of pan out, but he was certainly thinking of atomic theory. At this time, what we would call chemistry actually began diverging from alchemy. Although they shared many of the same practices and techniques, chemists eschewed the beliefs in transmutation of metals and elixirs. But don't worry. Every time things seem to be going in the right direction, here come the Europeans to ruin everything.
Yes.
As the Islamic Golden Age faded, alchemy made its way into medieval Europe with the 1144 translation of an Arabic book called The Book of the Composition of Alchemy. No one knows what it was about. Medieval alchemy became once again obsessed with the transmutation of metals and once again began cloaking their work in codes. Although no one ever was able to transmutate metals or find the key to eternal life, their attempts did lead to accidental discoveries. And although still mystical in nature, the Catholic Church mostly tolerated alchemy, probably because they didn't have enough gold in their golden city made of gold.
For sure. Like, any way you could get more gold, we're doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
So during the Renaissance, a dude named Paracelsus sought to further distance the actual study of chemicals from the mystical arts of divination and angel summoning. It was around this time that the terms chemia and alchemia became distinct. So even as it advanced, the mystical side of alchemy was too great a temptation for many. Most famous among the practitioners of alchemy at this time was Isaac Newton, a man so astoundingly intelligent that we used his theories to put a man on the moon and to probe shooting past Pluto. This tells us all one very important thing. Very smart people can believe in very dumb things.
Yeah.
So It can happen.
True that.
The Enlightenment finally drove the stake through the heart of alchemy. The practice of chemistry began to be seen as noble and enlightened, while the practice of alchemy was seen as antiquated and barbaric. But like all dumb ideas, it lumbered on for a while, with alchemists claiming to have made lead into gold as late as 1781. And again, like all dumb ideas, it came back from the dead during the occult revival of the 19th century. However, because chemistry was an established and robust science by then, these new alchemists focused on the spiritual side of alchemy and left the notions of transmutation alone. Alchemy in our modern times has mostly taken on the form of names of yoga studios and coffee shops. It's in countless, referenced in countless songs and poems, and even movies like Harry Potter talk about alchemy. But it's pretty much always seen as an ancient, dead, and silly science. There are, of course, to this day, people who claim to practice this form of spiritual alchemy, and while that can be somewhat disheartening, take solace in the fact that they're universally seen as kooks. And that's what we should take away from this. Alchemy was a response by a burgeoning intelligent species to observations of the world around it. As our intelligence grew, so did the sophistication of our explanations. Once we discovered that some of our explanations were false or antiquated, we got rid of them. And through this process, we discovered and developed chemistry and modern medicine. Do you hear that, religion? Once we didn't know why the sun rose or the seasons changed, so we made you up to explain them. Now we know all the things, so can we please put you in the dustbin of history along with your cousins, astrology and alchemy? And I just close. I mean, can you imagine? A world where, as we as a species progressed in our intelligence, we realized that religion no longer was adequate, and we teased out things like psychology or philosophy, and then just got rid of all the rest, like we've done with alchemy. Yeah. How much better a world we would be living in right now.
Well, it would certainly be different. It would certainly be different. It's hard to, imagine a world without religion, even though, John Lennon told me to. But he
was very specific about that.
Yeah, very specific. And also possessions, too. But it's, when I despair of that religion has stuck around so long and it still is just such a dangerous kind of infection. And then, Doug, you and I were talking the other day about like the religion in Dune, which is supposed to be 50,000 years in the future.
Right. 25 or so. Don't at me.
Oh, sorry. 25 or so. Yeah. It's, it despairs me even more, but there it is.
You know that book's not like in the strictest sense true, right?
Don't take this away from me. Don't let me have this.
How dare you, sir? Yeah.
So that's it. That's your alchemy.
That's alchemy. Well, so get out there and make some gold.
Dumb subject and you spun gold.
Make some gold. Well, thanks, Doug. I'm going to go drink that mercury.